The disappearance of Maura Murray on the evening of February 9, 2004, a 21-year-old nursing student named Maura Murray crashed her car on a rural road in New Hampshire. A local resident saw the accident and called police. But when officers arrived at the scene just minutes later, Maura was gone. She'd vanished into the cold winter night, leaving behind her damaged car, her belongings, and a trail of questions that remain unanswered 2 decades later. What happened to Maura Murray? Did she run into the woods and succumb to the harsh New Hampshire winter? Was she picked up by someone passing by, becoming the victim of foul play? Did she deliberately disappear, seeking to start a new life away from pressures and problems that had been mounting in the days before she vanished? Or is the truth something else entirely, something we haven't even considered? This is not a case with clear answers or obvious suspects. It's a puzzle with missing pieces, a mystery that has consumed investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths for 20 years. It spawned podcasts, documentaries, countless online forums, and theories ranging from plausible to bizarre. But more than that, it's the story of a young woman who seemed to have her life together on the surface, but who was struggling with pressures and problems that those around her didn't fully understand. It's about the final days before her disappearance, the strange decisions she made, and the clues she left behind that have never been adequately explained. Maura Murray's case has become one of the most discussed missing persons cases in modern American history. And tonight, we're going to examine every detail, every theory, every possibility. Because somewhere in the facts of this case lies the truth about what happened on that cold February night. Maura Cecilia Murray was born on May 4, 1982, in Hanson, Massachusetts. She was the fourth of 5 children in the Murray family. Her father, Fred Murray, worked in healthcare administration. Her mother, Laurie, struggled with mental health issues and substance abuse problems that would eventually lead to her parents' divorce when Maura was 6 years old. Growing up, Maura was known as a high achiever. She excelled academically, earning honors throughout her school years. She was also an accomplished athlete, running track and cross-country in high school. Those who knew her described her as intelligent, driven, and competitive. She set high standards for herself and worked hard to meet them. But beneath this accomplished exterior, Maura was also dealing with significant family challenges. Her mother's struggles affected the entire family. After her parents' divorce, Maura and her siblings split time between their father's and mother's homes. The instability and stress of this situation left its mark, though Maura rarely discussed these difficulties with friends or classmates. In high school, Maura dated a young man who would remain significant in her life for years. Their relationship was intense and sometimes turbulent, characterized by the passionate ups and downs common in teenage romance. But it was also important to Maura, providing stability and connection during a difficult period. After graduating from Whitman-Hanson Regional High School in 2000, Maura enrolled at the United States Military Academy at West Point. This was a prestigious achievement, reflecting both her academic abilities and her discipline. At West Point, she continued running track and maintained good grades. She seemed to be thriving in the structured military environment. But during her sophomore year at West Point, something changed. The exact details remain somewhat unclear, but Maura was involved in an incident related to credit card fraud. According to reports, she used a stolen credit card to order food. When confronted, she didn't deny it. The incident was serious enough that it jeopardized her standing at the academy. Facing potential expulsion and possibly worse consequences, Maura made a decision. She withdrew from West Point and transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst. It was a significant change, going from the rigid structure of a military academy to a large state university. For someone who seemed to thrive on structure and achievement, this transition may have been more difficult than she let on. At UMass Amherst, Maura enrolled in the nursing program. She moved into a dorm, made new friends, and seemed to be adjusting well. She continued running, joining the university's track team. She maintained a relationship with her high school boyfriend, though they were now in a long-distance situation since he joined the army and was stationed elsewhere. But Maura also began a new relationship with a fellow student named Billy Roche. Billy was also in ROTC and would later join the army. The relationship between Maura and Billy became serious quickly, though it was complicated by the fact that Maura was technically still involved with her previous boyfriend. This romantic triangle created stress and conflict in Maura's life. Those who knew Maura at UMass described her as friendly but somewhat private. She had close friends but didn't share everything with them. She worked hard in her nursing classes, which were demanding and stressful. She balanced school, track practice, part-time work, and complicated romantic relationships. On the surface, she was managing it all. But the pressure was building. In the fall of 2003, Maura's junior year, several incidents occurred that suggested she was struggling more than people realized. In October, she was working a security job at a university art gallery when she was caught on camera taking items that didn't belong to her. The university handled it internally, but it was another incident of theft, echoing what had happened at West Point. Then, in early November, Maura was at a party with Billy when she received a phone call. After the call, she became extremely upset. Billy later described her as breaking down emotionally, crying uncontrollably. She wouldn't tell him what the call was about or who it was from. This mysterious phone call has never been explained, though it clearly affected Maura deeply. Later that same night, after leaving the party, Maura borrowed Billy's car. Around 3 a.m., she crashed it, causing significant damage. When police arrived, they found Maura in the car, unresponsive. She appeared to be in shock or having some kind of emotional breakdown. She was taken to the hospital but released after evaluation. Billy didn't press charges for the damaged car, chalking it up to an accident and emotional distress. These incidents painted a picture of someone under increasing pressure, making poor decisions, and perhaps crying out for help in ways that weren't immediately recognized. But Maura continued with her classes, her track practice, her relationships. To most people, she seemed to be handling things reasonably well, just going through the normal stresses of college life. In January 2004, Maura's father Fred visited her at UMass. They spent time together, going car shopping because Maura's car was having problems. They looked at several vehicles and eventually purchased a used 1996 black Saturn sedan. Fred co-signed for the car, helping Maura with the down payment. It seemed like a normal father-daughter interaction, a parent helping a college student with practical necessities. But in retrospect, some have wondered if Fred noticed signs that Maura was struggling. Did they discuss her problems during that visit? Did Maura confide in her father about stress or difficulties she was facing? Fred has been somewhat vague about the specifics of their conversations that weekend, which has led to speculation about what Maura might have shared with him. The weekend before Maura disappeared, Billy was visiting her at UMass. Their relationship had been strained. Billy was preparing to deploy to the Middle East with the army, adding stress to an already complicated situation. On Saturday night, February 7th, Billy and Maura had a phone conversation that apparently didn't go well. Billy has described Maura as being upset during this call, though he's been unclear about the specific reasons. That same weekend, Maura called several hotels and condominiums in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. The White Mountains were a place she'd visited before with her family, a vacation spot with hiking trails and ski resorts. She didn't make any reservations, but she inquired about availability and rates. Why was she calling hotels? Was she planning a trip? If so, why? And why didn't she actually book anything? On Sunday, February 8th, Maura was working her job at the university. A supervisor described her as seeming normal, going about her duties without any apparent distress. But then, around 10 p.m., she received a phone call. After this call, a co-worker found Maura in what was described as a catatonic state, unresponsive and emotionally shut down. The supervisor called Maura's older sister Kathleen, who came to pick her up and take her home. What was that phone call? Who called her? What did they say that caused such an extreme reaction? These questions have never been answered. Kathleen has said that Maura wouldn't talk about it, that she was too upset to explain what had happened. This mysterious phone call on Sunday night, less than 24 hours before Maura disappeared, remains one of the most frustrating unknowns in the entire case. The next morning, Monday, February 9th, 2004, Maura woke up in her dorm room and made a series of decisions that would lead to her disappearance. Understanding what she did that day, and trying to understand why, is crucial to unraveling the mystery of what happened to Maura Murray. Monday, February 9th, 2004, started like many other days at UMass Amherst. Students were in the middle of the semester, dealing with classes, assignments, and the usual college stresses. But for Maura Murray, this day would be different. This would be the last day anyone can confirm seeing her alive. Around 7 a.m., Maura emailed her professors and her work supervisor. The emails were brief and similar in content. She told them there had been a death in her family and she would be missing the next week of classes and work. This was a lie. There had been no death in her family. All of Maura's immediate family members were alive and well. Why did Maura lie about this? What did she need a week away for? Around 1 p.m., Maura went to an ATM on campus and withdrew $280 in cash. This wasn't an unusual amount, but it would later become significant because it represented most of the money she had available. Security camera footage from the ATM shows Maura alone, appearing calm and normal. There's no sign of distress or that anything is wrong. Shortly after, Maura went to a liquor store near campus. She purchased about $40 worth of alcohol, Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, vodka, and boxed wine. The purchase was captured on the store's security camera. Again, Maura appeared normal, just a college student buying alcohol, something that happened every day at stores near college campuses. Back at her dorm, Maura packed some belongings. She took toiletries, clothes for several days, her favorite stuffed animal, some textbooks, and the alcohol she'd just purchased. She didn't pack everything, leaving most of her possessions in her room. She didn't check out of the dorm or indicate to anyone that she was leaving for an extended period. Sometime in the early afternoon, Maura left campus in her black satin sedan. She headed north on Route 91, driving toward New Hampshire. Based on later timeline reconstructions, she was on the road by around 2 o'clock or 3 p.m. at the latest. Where was she going? The most commonly accepted theory is that she was heading to the White Mountains area of New Hampshire, the same region where she'd been calling hotels over the weekend. But she'd never made a reservation. She had no confirmed destination. And she was driving in February, in New England, when a winter storm was forecast. The drive from UMass to the White Mountains takes about 2 to 3 hours, depending on the exact destination and road conditions. Maura would have been driving through increasingly rural areas as she headed north. The roads become more isolated, the towns smaller and farther apart. Around 7 p.m., Maura was on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, specifically in an area called Woodsville. Route 112 is known as the Kankomegas Highway in some sections, a scenic but winding road through the White Mountains. In winter, it can be treacherous, especially at night. At approximately 7:27 p.m., Maura's car went off the road at a sharp curve known as the Weathered Barn Corner. The Saturn struck some trees or a snowbank, causing damage to the front end. The airbags deployed. The car came to rest partially in the eastbound lane of the road, its hazard lights flashing. This is where Maura Murray's story becomes a true mystery. Because what happened in the next 10 to 15 minutes would determine her fate, and nobody knows for certain what that was. The crash was witnessed by a local resident named Butch Atwood. Butch was driving his bus home when he came around the curve and saw the damaged Saturn. He stopped and approached the car. Inside, he found Maura. She was conscious and appeared to be physically okay, though shaken by the accident. Butch asked if she was hurt and if she needed help. According to his later statements, Maura told him she was fine and that she'd already called AAA. This was almost certainly a lie. Cell phone records showed that Maura's phone hadn't had service in that area for some time. She couldn't have called anyone. Butch offered to call police for her. Maura declined, insisting she'd already made arrangements. Butch, somewhat reluctantly, left the scene and drove the short distance to his house, which was less than 100 yards away. When he got home, around 7:43 p.m., he called 911 to report the accident, despite Maura's insistence that she didn't need help. While Butch was at his house making the call, another witness became involved. A neighbor, Faith Westman, had also seen the crash or its immediate aftermath. She'd called 911 around 7:27 p.m., reporting the accident and stating that she saw a man smoking a cigarette near the car. This detail has never been fully explained. Butch Atwood didn't smoke. Was there another person at the scene? Or did Faith Westman misidentify something she saw in the darkness? When police officers arrived at the scene at approximately 7:45 p.m., just 10 to 15 minutes after the crash, Maura was gone. The Saturn sat empty, its driver's side door slightly ajar, the windshield cracked from the airbag deployment, the car still running with its hazard lights on. Inside the car, officers found several items that would become key pieces of evidence. The car was locked, but they were able to look through the windows and later gain access. They found a damaged cell phone, which appeared to have been in the crash and was no longer functioning properly. They found the alcohol Maura had purchased earlier that day. Some of it had spilled in the crash. They found Maura's AAA card, some textbooks, and printed directions to somewhere in the White Mountains. What they didn't find was Maura's wallet, her cell phone charger, or her credit cards. These items were presumably with her when she left the scene. Also notably absent was her backpack, which witnesses said they'd seen in the car immediately after the crash. The area around the crash site was searched that night, though the search was limited by darkness and weather conditions. Police used flashlights to look along the road and into the nearby woods. They found no sign of Maura. No footprints leading away from the car, no trace of where she'd gone. It was as if she'd simply vanished into the cold February night. And despite extensive searches in the days, weeks, and years that followed, no one has found any confirmed evidence of what happened to Maura Murray after she walked away from that crashed car. The initial response to Maura Murray's disappearance was complicated by several factors. First, law enforcement didn't immediately treat this as a missing person case. They assumed Maura had left the scene because she'd been drinking and didn't want to be arrested for DUI. The spilled alcohol in the car and Maura's apparent reluctance to wait for police supported this theory. This assumption led to a delay in launching a full-scale search. Police checked the area around the crash site but didn't organize extensive search parties that first night. They expected Maura would either turn up at a nearby house or that they'd find her walking along the road once she sobered up and realized she needed help. Maura's family wasn't notified of the accident until the next day. When Fred Murray learned his daughter was missing, he immediately drove from Massachusetts to New Hampshire, arriving Tuesday evening. He was shocked to learn that no significant search had been conducted yet. His daughter had been missing in freezing temperatures for over 24 hours, and law enforcement seemed to be treating it as a routine DUI evasion rather than a missing person emergency. Fred began his own search, driving the roads around the crash site, stopping at businesses and houses to ask if anyone had seen Maura. He put up missing person posters with Maura's photo and description. He contacted local media, trying to generate coverage that might lead to tips or sightings. By Wednesday, February 11th, the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department organized an official search. Search and rescue teams combed the woods around the crash site. They used tracking dogs, which picked up Maura's scent of the car and followed it a short distance east along Route 112. Then the trail went cold in the middle of the road. This suggested Maura had walked along the highway for a short distance and then possibly gotten into a vehicle. Helicopters with thermal imaging equipment flew over the area, looking for any sign of a body in the woods. The brutal reality was that if Maura had run into the woods and gotten lost or injured, she might not have survived the freezing temperatures. The search focused on finding either a living person who might be injured and in need of rescue, or a body. The searches continued for days but found nothing. No clothing, no footprints beyond the initial trail that ended on the road, no evidence of where Maura had gone. It was as if she'd stepped into a vehicle and disappeared. As the investigation progressed, police began looking into Maura's background and the events leading up to her disappearance. They interviewed her friends, family, professors, and co-workers. They examined her dorm room, her computer, her phone records. What they discovered raised more questions than answers. Maura's computer showed she'd been researching various topics in the days before she disappeared. She'd looked up directions to the White Mountains area. She'd searched for information about how to disappear and not be found. She'd looked at websites about starting over with a new identity. These searches suggested premeditation, that Maura had been planning something. But what? Was she planning to commit suicide in the woods? Was she trying to escape her life and start over somewhere new? Or was she just researching out of curiosity or for other reasons we can't know? Her emails to professors and work, claiming a family death, clearly showed she'd planned to be away for at least a week. But she'd taken only enough clothes and belongings for a few days. She'd withdrawn cash but not her entire bank balance. She'd made no arrangements for her classes, her dorm room, her belongings beyond that week. It was as if she'd planned a trip but not what would happen after. Police also discovered that Maura had been having problems in the weeks before she disappeared. There was the mysterious phone call on Sunday night that had left her catatonic. There was the stress of her relationship with Billy, who was about to deploy overseas. There were her nursing classes, which were demanding and in which she may have been struggling. There was the credit card incident at UMass, which could have led to serious consequences. There were possible financial pressures. All of these stressors painted a picture of someone who was overwhelmed and perhaps looking for an escape. But escape to where? And why disappear in such a dramatic and dangerous way? Investigators also looked at the people in Maura's life. Billy Roche was one of the first people they examined closely. Where was he when Maura disappeared? He was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, with the Army. Phone records and testimony confirmed this. He couldn't have been in New Hampshire when Maura crashed her car. But could he have been involved in some other way? Had their relationship problems driven Maura to drastic action? Fred Murray, despite being Maura's devoted father and primary advocate, also faced scrutiny. Some questioned whether there was more to their relationship than he disclosed. Had something happened during his visit in January? Was there a reason Maura might have been running from her family? Fred has consistently maintained that he had a normal, loving relationship with his daughter and that he has no idea why she disappeared. Other men in Maura's life were also investigated. Former boyfriends, friends, acquaintances. Anyone who might have had a reason to harm her or who might know where she'd gone. But no solid leads emerged from these investigations. The case attracted significant media attention. Local news covered it extensively. Then, as the mystery deepened and no trace of Maura was found, national media picked up the story. Maura's face appeared on CNN, NBC, and other major networks. Her disappearance was featured on shows like Disappeared and Unsolved Mysteries. The publicity generated thousands of tips. People called in reporting sightings of Maura in various locations. Someone claimed to have seen her at a gas station in Vermont. Another person reported seeing her in Canada. A psychic claimed to know where her body was located. But none of these tips led anywhere productive. As weeks turned into months with no breaks in the case, the investigation began to focus on different theories. If Maura hadn't died in the woods and her body hadn't been found, then what had happened? Had she gotten into a car with someone who then harmed her? Had she deliberately disappeared and was living somewhere under new identity? Had she committed suicide in a location that hadn't been discovered? Each theory had evidence supporting it and problems undermining it. And as time passed without answers, Maura Murray's disappearance became one of those cases that captures the public imagination precisely because it seems unsolvable. Over the 20 years since Maura Murray disappeared, countless theories have been proposed about what happened to her. Some are based on solid evidence and logical reasoning. Others are speculative, relying on assumptions and circumstantial connections. But examining these theories is essential to understanding the full scope of this mystery. Theory 1. Death by exposure in the woods. This is perhaps the simplest and, in some ways, most likely theory. Maura crashed her car, possibly after drinking some of the alcohol she'd purchased earlier. She was afraid of getting another DUI or facing other consequences. When Butch Atwood offered to call police, she panicked. After he left, she grabbed some belongings and ran into the woods to hide. The temperature that night dropped to around 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The woods in that area are dense and difficult to navigate, especially in the dark and in winter conditions. If Maura had been drinking, was disoriented from the crash, and was inadequately dressed for the cold, she could have quickly become hypothermic. Hypothermia causes confusion and poor decision-making, which could have led her deeper into the woods rather than back to the road. Supporting evidence: the tracking dogs lost her scent on the road, but this could have been because she doubled back through the woods at some point. Despite extensive searches, those woods are vast and there are areas that are nearly impossible to search thoroughly. Bodies have been found years later in wilderness areas that were previously searched. Problems with this theory: the searches immediately after her disappearance were extensive and involved experienced search and rescue teams. Cadaver dogs were brought in multiple times over the years. Hunters and hikers regularly traverse those woods. In 20 years, no trace of Maura's body, clothing, or belongings has been found. While it's possible she's still out there, many experts believe a body would have been discovered by now. Theory 2. She got into a vehicle and met with foul play. This theory suggests that after the crash, Maura accepted a ride from someone passing by. This person then harmed her, either opportunistically or because they'd been waiting for such an opportunity. Maura's body was then hidden in a location that hasn't been discovered. Supporting evidence: the tracking dogs following Maura's scent stopped abruptly in the middle of the road, suggesting she got into a vehicle. The short time frame between when witnesses last saw the car and when police arrived meant there was a window for someone to pick her up. Route 112, while not heavily traveled at night in winter, does see some traffic. Several people in the area had criminal backgrounds. One local resident, known to have been driving in the area that night, had a history of violence against women. Another man who lived nearby was later convicted of an unrelated assault. These individuals were investigated but never charged with anything related to Maura's disappearance. Problems with this theory: there's no direct evidence of foul play. No witnesses saw Maura get into anyone's vehicle. No forensic evidence links any suspect to her disappearance. The timing would have been incredibly tight. Cell phone records of local residents don't show suspicious patterns. While certainly possible, this theory requires either incredible bad luck or premeditation by someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Theory 3. Suicide. Some investigators and observers believe Maura deliberately went to New Hampshire to end her life. The stresses she was facing, the mysterious phone call that left her distraught, her internet searches about disappearing, all of these could be interpreted as signs of suicidal ideation. Supporting evidence. Maura's behavior in the days before she disappeared showed emotional distress. Her internet searches included topics related to disappearing. She'd been found unresponsive after the car crash in November, suggesting mental health struggles. She took alcohol with her, which could have been part of a suicide plan. The location she chose, the White Mountains in winter, would be consistent with someone planning to die of exposure. Some suicide experts have suggested the pattern fits: giving away or packing up possessions, lying to create time alone, traveling to an isolated location, engaging in risky behavior. If Maura intended to die, she might have chosen a location in the woods that would be difficult to find, wanting to spare her family the trauma of finding her body. Problems with this theory. Friends and family insist Maura wasn't suicidal. She'd made plans for after the week she'd told her professors she'd be gone. She'd been looking forward to Billy's return from deployment. While she was stressed, stress alone doesn't necessarily indicate suicidal intent. And if she died in the woods, the extensive searches should have found her body, especially the initial searches when the body would have been relatively fresh and easier to detect. Theory 4. Voluntary disappearance. This theory proposes that Maura deliberately disappeared to start a new life somewhere else. She was overwhelmed by her problems, wanted to escape her circumstances, and saw disappearing as a solution. Supporting evidence. Maura's internet searches included how to disappear and start over. She withdrew cash, which would be harder to trace than credit card use. She lied to professors and worked to buy herself time before anyone would look for her. She left her damaged phone behind, eliminating a tracking device. She'd been researching the White Mountains, which could have been a waypoint rather than a destination. Some theorists suggest Maura might have had help, perhaps from someone we don't know about, someone who picked her up after the crash and helped her vanish. There have been unconfirmed sightings of someone resembling Maura in various locations over the years, though none have been verified. Problems with this theory. Maura took no steps to establish a new identity before she left. She didn't empty her bank accounts or gather important documents. She left behind her credit cards, which would be necessary for starting over. She was extremely close to her family, particularly her father, and disappearing would cause them tremendous pain. She had no known connections in other places where she could have gone to start over. Most importantly, voluntary disappearances are extremely difficult to maintain. In the age of digital surveillance, facial recognition, and interconnected databases, staying hidden requires careful planning and resources. A 21-year-old college student with limited money and no experience in subterfuge would find it nearly impossible to stay hidden for 20 years with no trace. Theory 5. She's being held against her. Will some have theorized that Maura was abducted and has been held captive somewhere for the past 20 years. While rare, there have been cases of long-term abductions, such as Elizabeth Smart, J.C. Dugard, and the Cleveland kidnapping victims. Supporting evidence. The lack of a body and the complete absence of evidence could be explained if Maura is being held in a location that hasn't been searched. The short time frame for someone to pick her up after the crash could have been a terrible coincidence, an opportunistic abduction by someone passing by. Problems with this theory. Long-term captivity cases are extremely rare. They typically involve children or very young adults, not college students. Maura was 21, old enough to potentially fight back or escape. Most abduction victims who are held long-term are eventually found, either through rescue or because the captor releases them or dies. 20 years is an extraordinarily long time for such a situation to remain undiscovered. Theory 6. Maura knew her killer. A variation on the foul play theory suggests that Maura arranged to meet someone in New Hampshire, someone she knew and trusted, and this person harmed her. Supporting evidence. Maura's trip seemed planned. She'd been calling hotels, had directions, appeared to be going somewhere specific. Perhaps she was meeting someone. The mysterious phone calls she received could have been coordinating this meeting. This person could have picked her up after the crash, either because they'd already been nearby or because she called them somehow. Billy Roche has been scrutinized under this theory, though his alibi places him in Oklahoma at the time. But could someone else in her life have been involved? A friend, an ex-boyfriend, someone she knew from UMass or West Point. Problems with this theory. There's no evidence Maura was planning to meet anyone. Her phone records don't show calls coordinating a meeting. No one has come forward claiming to have had plans with Maura that night. And if she knew her killer, why hasn't any evidence of their connection been discovered in 20 years of investigation? Theory 7. The tandem driver theory. This popular theory, advocated strongly by some investigators and amateur sleuths, suggests that Maura was following or being followed by another vehicle. This tandem driver may have been helping her relocate, or may have had more sinister intentions. Supporting evidence. Some witnesses reported seeing multiple vehicles near the crash site around the time of Maura's accident. Faith Westman reported seeing a man smoking near the crashed car, which was never fully explained. There were reports of a red truck seen in the area. Some theorists suggest this other driver either helped Maura disappear or abducted her after the crash. The theory would explain why Maura seemed to be going somewhere specific but had made no reservations. She was being guided by or following someone else. It would also explain how she disappeared so quickly and completely from the crash site. Problems with this theory. No solid evidence of a tandem driver has ever been found. The witness reports are inconsistent and could be explained by other factors. No one matching the description of a tandem driver has been identified. Maura's phone records don't show communication with anyone that would support this theory. Like many aspects of this case, the tandem driver remains speculation based on ambiguous witness statements. In 2021, New Hampshire authorities announced they were conducting a search in the Franconia area, not far from where Maura's car had crashed. Heavy equipment was brought in. Ground-penetrating radar was used. The search lasted several days and generated significant media attention. But ultimately, nothing was found. Authorities stated the search was based on a credible tip but declined to provide details about what they'd been looking for. These periodic searches and investigations keep hope alive that Maura might be found, but each unsuccessful search also deepens the mystery. Where is she? If she died in the woods, why hasn't her body been found? If she was murdered, where was she hidden? If she disappeared voluntarily, how has she stayed hidden for so long? Technology has advanced significantly since 2004. Cell phone tracking, surveillance cameras, digital forensics, DNA analysis, all of these tools are more sophisticated now than they were when Maura disappeared. If someone disappeared under similar circumstances today, there would be far more evidence available. But for Maura's case, investigators are limited to the evidence that existed in 2004. Her damaged cell phone, the contents of her car, witness statements from that night, and the searches conducted in the immediate aftermath. Modern technology can reanalyze this evidence but can't create new evidence that wasn't collected at the time. One significant question that has emerged over the years concerns the first responders and their handling of the scene. Were items removed from Maura's car before it was properly processed as evidence? Were there items at the scene that weren't documented? Some witnesses have claimed the car contained items when they saw it that weren't later listed in official inventories. 20 years have passed since Maura Murray disappeared on that cold February night. In that time, technology has advanced, investigative techniques have improved, and public interest in true crime has exploded. Yet we're no closer to definitively answering what happened to her. Maura would be 42 years old now if she's still alive. She'd be a decade out of nursing school, possibly married, possibly with children. Instead, she remains frozen in time, a 21-year-old college student who vanished without a trace. For her family, the past 20 years have been an agony of not knowing. Fred Murray continues to search, continues to advocate, continues to hope that someday he'll get answers. Maura's siblings have had to live their lives under the shadow of their sister's disappearance, knowing that any phone call could be the one that finally explains what happened. The impact on the community where Maura disappeared has also been significant. Haverhill, New Hampshire, is a small town that never asked to become the center of one of the most discussed missing person cases in modern history. Residents have been questioned repeatedly, local businesses have been scrutinized, and the area has become a pilgrimage site for true crime enthusiasts and amateur investigators. Some locals appreciate the attention, understanding that keeping Maura's case visible might eventually lead to answers. Others resent it, feeling that their community has been unfairly portrayed and that the constant scrutiny is invasive and sometimes harmful. The case has also raised important questions about how missing person investigations are conducted. The initial response to Maura's disappearance was clearly inadequate. Officers assumed it was a DUI situation and didn't launch an immediate full-scale search. By the time the case was taken seriously, crucial time had been lost. These failures have led to changes in how some jurisdictions handle missing person reports, particularly those involving young adults. There's greater recognition that not every missing person is a voluntary runaway, and that quick action in the initial hours can be crucial to finding someone alive. Maura's case also highlights the challenges of investigating disappearances in rural areas with limited resources. The New Hampshire State Police and local departments did conduct extensive searches, but they were limited by budget, personnel, and the vast wilderness area that needed to be covered. Even the most dedicated investigators can't search every square mile of forest, every abandoned building, every potential hiding place. The role of media and public interest in this case has been both helpful and complicated. The attention has kept Maura's disappearance in the public consciousness, generated tips, and put pressure on law enforcement to keep investigating. But it's also led to speculation, harassment of innocent people, and the spread of unfounded theories that have sometimes distracted from evidence-based investigation. What can we conclude after examining all the evidence, all the theories, all the investigations? The honest answer is that we don't know what happened to Maura Murray. Each theory has some evidence supporting it and significant problems undermining it. If we had to assess the most likely scenarios based on available evidence, death by exposure in the woods remains a strong possibility, despite the extensive searches that found nothing. The wilderness in that area is vast and difficult terrain. If Maura ran into the woods, became disoriented, and succumbed to hypothermia, her remains could still be undiscovered. Foul play is also very possible. The fact that Maura seemingly got into a vehicle and vanished suggests she may have accepted a ride from someone who then harmed her. Without a body or forensic evidence, this remains speculation, but it can't be ruled out. Suicide remains a consideration, though less likely given the lack of any discovered remains and the extensive searches of areas where someone might go to end their life. Voluntary disappearance seems the least likely of the major theories, given the difficulty of staying hidden in the modern world and the complete absence of any verified sightings in 20 years. But the truth is, we don't know. And that not knowing is perhaps the most difficult aspect of this case for everyone involved. The disappearance of Maura Murray reminds us that sometimes, despite our best efforts, despite technology and investigation and public attention, mysteries remain unsolved. People vanish, and we can't always explain why or how. It reminds us that the people we think we know might be struggling with problems we don't see. Maura appeared to be handling the normal stresses of college life, but beneath the surface, she was dealing with pressures that we still don't fully understand. It reminds us that a single moment, a single decision, a single accident can change everything. If Maura hadn't crashed her car that night, or if she'd waited for police instead of leaving the scene, her life would have taken a completely different path. And it reminds us of the devastating impact that one person's disappearance has on everyone who loves them. Fred Murray will likely never stop searching for his daughter. Maura's siblings will always wonder what happened to their sister. And somewhere, there might be someone who knows what happened, someone carrying the weight of that knowledge, someone who could provide answers but chooses not to. Until that person comes forward, until evidence is discovered, until Maura is found, the mystery remains. And we're left with questions, theories, and the faint hope that someday, somehow, we'll learn the truth about what happened to Maura Murray on that cold February night in 2004. If you have any information about Maura Murray's disappearance, please contact the New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit. Even the smallest detail, something that might seem insignificant, could be the piece of information that finally solves this 20-year-old mystery. Maura Murray deserves to be found. Her family deserves answers. And justice, however delayed, deserves to be served.